Do you find people like do something that they think they love to their own demise sometimes?
Their own detriment? 100%.
Yeah.
I find that, and I think a lot of business owners do that. They're super keen to get into starting a business. I mean, it's kind of a glamorous thing. It sounds exciting, all these things. They love whatever it may be, vinyl wrapping cars, and they love cars. So they get into it, and they can't see the light because what's happening is they're getting into it, they're doing what they love, but now they're working, 80 hours a week, and it's not kind of hitting that growth target that they kind of originally envisioned, but they kind of keep chasing it. And so you get into the cycle. But the problem is it gets to a point where, okay, now you've taken business loans, and you now have a payroll, and you're in so deep, so you can't just cut it off, right? And a lot of times businesses aren't necessarily worth that much until they pay all those things off and they start cash flowing quite aggressively. And learning all those things is not easy. Just because you're doing it, you don't necessarily just learn it. And the other thing I find with business, there's an awkward stage, is like sole proprietor where your overhead's low and you have maybe one or two people. I find you make a ton of money then for the size.
Yeah. Or enough to get really excited and say, well, this is kind of good enough, you know, but eventually you often get burnt out under that model. Like you're doing great, the money's good, but inevitably you can't,
because you're doing everything.
You can't scale. Yeah.
So then you go to a medium-sized business and now you hire all these people, you add on a location, you add all this branding. Now your overhead's so high, so you're doing 5x your sales, but your costs actually 5x. So you're still taking home the same dollars.
Yep.
You're just running this massive expense now.
In the real estate world, we call that teams. Setting up real estate teams. Sounds like the worst thing ever.
Yeah. So then you have
people
that.
laugh when they listen to that, or not laugh.
Yeah. So then you get to that position and you're like, crap. So it's either then you have to go even bigger, and that's where you really need to have the skills. I think that's where it goes from, doesn't matter how hard you work, that's where some skills come into play that you're going, okay, now I'm going full corp, like I'm going large scale industry.
Yeah, I'm stepping back entirely. I'm the puppet master.
The market has to be able to sustain that.
That's true. Yeah,
there's so many factors at that point. And so I think that people get stuck in that medium-sized business where it's nice, it's a business, and it has some ability for you to step away a little bit, but you still need to be there consistently. So yeah, I would say I see a lot of people to their own detriment get sucked into it. But if they're enjoying their time and they're okay with that, it is very gratifying, like to run your own business and to lock up shop at the end of the night and to see those things happen and or land a big contract. Like there's a lot of things that take place when you have a business that is super, super satisfying. It's even when I first bought this, like I sat up the whole night. We had a hurricane. I sat in the office the whole night next to the phone, waiting for it to ring. It didn't ring.
Oh.
Didn't ring. I thought it was unhooked. But I spent the whole night awake sitting there because I was so excited, right? Like this is the business. Like this is our time. Everything was good. All the gear was lined up. Like the vans were ready to go. We had them parked at the doors, and the phone didn't ring. And everyone was ready. Everyone was on standby. But that's part of running a business. But then I remember the first time we did get calls, it was super exciting. And I remember our first few like major storm events, we got 1 or 2 calls. This recent one, we had a rainstorm. We're not even actively marketing anymore, and we got like 8 or 10. Like it was absurd. Like everyone's calling looking for it. And I'm like, we're not even trying anymore. Like I would have died for that when I first opened.
Right.
But you get to that point too where the business starts to kind of have some of its own residual strength.
So it's sort of like, there's the sole operator just going out there, and sometimes that's the lean, mean, best model. And if people,
that's a great model.
If people love that and they enjoy what they're doing, there's something to be said for not scaling beyond that.
Big time.
And I find the only reason, because it's very similar to what we do in our industry, where people start to talk about, well, I should set up teams. And the challenge is, if someone is looking to work with you for the Neal experience, you have a team around you. We talk about this all the time.
Yep.
The team in our world is, okay, great to connect with you. I'll be overseeing everything. You'll have me as a resource all the time. But in the meanwhile, here's so-and-so, and they're going to be the one out there. And then people sort of feel like, oh, well, I thought I was getting one thing, and I'm getting something slightly different. Yep. And maybe they're okay with that, maybe they're not.
Yep.
But then I always worry about, too, the referral source. It's like, I sent you my sister, and you sent her to someone else. So does that tell me that you no longer want referrals? Or, how do I feel about the fact that, they weren't sent to the same person that I was expecting, and so on. And I worry about that, and I worry about to the point, well, that's part of the reason I never have set up a real estate team. The other thing is, and then this is that middle level, you become so responsible to those people. You have to feed those people around you, and you have to put the systems around them for them to succeed. And there's some teams that do it really well, and there's some that don't do it well at all. And the ones that don't do it well at all, I sort of wonder, well, why are they doing it? And a lot of it is ego. If I look at a lot of these companies that try to scale way too early, and they all do it because of ego.
That's why I did it.
Right? there's one thing to, say I've got my own shingle, I'm doing my thing, and I'm crushing it. But that's not as fancy as having like your own office and this. Oh, we had a team of this many. Like how many people are quick to fire? Like how many staff they have and blah blah blah.
Yep.
That's the ego play. The people who tend to do it well, probably they reach a point in their life where their personal lives are suffering, or their health lives are suffering, or they're changing their priorities, and then they want to build this team, which the next level of business, in order to buy back some of their time.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's when it's done correctly. And then the problem is you have to realize the thing that you got into the industry for, whether it's building decks or framing a house or running electrical, the thing that you actually like, you are no longer in that business anymore.
Exactly.
You are in the people business.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing. And I think between that and between that sometimes it's an ego play is why people don't often get past that middle scaling.
Yeah.
And they'll either scale right back down, the team disappears, or, it just dissipates in some other form.
Yeah.
But the real hard thing is, I guess, going from that to even beyond that. And it sounds like you kind of peaked out at the middle level, realized, okay, my scaling options here are limited. I would have to replicate this model in multiple jurisdictions. And does that even get me where I want to go?
Yeah.
You said no.
Yeah.
And you're on to something else. So I guess the people that are looking at getting into a business, it's like, well, do you want to do the work? Do you want to be in the people business? Or do you want to start some big corporate thing?
Yeah.
Right? I know you're more interested in the latter, but other people might be at different rungs, because every now and again, people are like, well, I want to do this, and then I'm going to have these many people around me. It's like, well, why exactly? What exactly do you want that for?
Don't jump in too deep. I think that's what you like in general. Like, if you want to start something too, like start small. A lot of people say they want to start a business and they're working a full-time job. I'm like, find a way to start it on the side.
Yeah.
Do not give up your full-time job. Start on the side. Make sure there's some market demand. Make sure that it actually makes sense. You actually do like it, and do a super small version of the business. And then, okay, now it makes sense. Add some people on it and drag it as long as you can before you absolutely have to then go full bore into it. Because you don't want to make this where, like, I made the mistake. I jumped in so deep. We bought so much stuff. We hired so many people. It was an ego thing. Like, I was fired up. I was young. I was hiring all these people. And we thought it was all amazing, but the overhead's just burning up like crazy. And so for a few months, everything's fine. And then it starts not being so good when things slow down a little bit. I think you're right. In saying
also,
that.
you lose the part of the job that you liked. Like you were saying, you liked the deal, like you liked the stuff coming in, and then increasingly, that's not what you're doing. You're people managing and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But people are so, and I think comes back to the ego. Like, are you doing what you're doing because of your ego, or are you doing what you're doing because it's the smartest thing to do?
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.